So today we're talking about crisis intervention support and referral. Um, After lunch, we will talk about oh, anti-oppression and ethics. Right. So, reminder: same agreements as yesterday. Take care of yourself as you need to. Be open to new ideas. You guys did great with that yesterday. Keep it up. Respect confidentiality and ask questions. Uh, I don't think we'll have problems with those things. So keep those going. Um, so for this first portion, this is kind of the agenda for it. We're going to talk about trauma theory in the brain, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response, vicarious trauma, remaining resilient, self-care, empathy, crisis intervention, effective listening, safety planning, and a little bit of medical advocacy. So, what is your guys' understanding of trauma? You could give like a simple definition. What would you say trauma is? So, trauma has many effects. At a basic level, like you said, trauma is something that has a long-term impact on your body and your brain. Uh, Simple definition is usually that it's something that's beyond our capacity uh, to like accept and regulate. It's emotionally overwhelming to us. So, you can have emotional experiences that are negative that aren't really overwhelming. You have a little bit of pain that you can tolerate, right? But it's the key factor of what is trauma versus other types of pain is the overwhelming part about it. And that's what really causes a lot of the long term damage. Um, we experience it when our safety, agency, dignity, or belonging is that. We talked about yesterday how people will often trade some of those things for another thing. Um, but a way you can really make that happen is you might see this with a client where they're maybe in an abusive relationship, but they have some stability in other areas of their life. You're trying to help them, and they're considering maybe leaving their partner. That might really trigger them, right? Because they might get a trauma response out of that, of like, oh, my belonging is really important to me. I valued that over other things sometimes, and that being threatened might be something that's pretty intimidating to them. People have a tendency to trade those areas, like I said. When people do experience trauma, restoring safety, agency, dignity, and belonging are key to ending the traumatic experience. So, kind of two ways to think about how ending it. There's like the incident while the harm is happening, and then there's sort of the aftermath of it. Um, and in the aftermath, working on sort of dealing with some of the repercussions of that, you have to first kind of end the event as it happens, right? Um, and one of the ways we can do that is working on restoring those areas. That's also part of healing too, kind of longer term. So like, if it's a physical safety thing, it's like they immediately get into safe space, but then you kind of have some longer term work on reestablishing that person's feeling of safety over time, right? That doesn't happen immediately. So how trauma affects the brain. Talk about these three main areas here. Prefrontal cortex is the front part of our brain here, which is in charge of our rational thinking, regulates our emotions such as fear responses, which come from the amygdala. Um, in people with PTSD, it's been shown that their prefrontal cortex is reduced or smaller than average. Um, and that's a result of trauma. It's not that they had a smaller prefrontal cortex and therefore they experienced more trauma. It's a trauma response that your brain um, inhibits that portion of your brain. Uh, and that's one of the reasons why anyone who's got kind of a lot of trauma and maybe hasn't really healed from it, um, a lot of times people who are kind of in the midst of it are going to kind of struggle with the more rational thinking, rational planning uh, types of tasks. Um, and that's one of the things that can make helping people who are in trauma difficult is um, if they're still really overwhelmed by it, their capacity to really consider and integrate change into their circumstances can be pretty limited. I'm not saying they can't; it just can be a barrier. The amygdala, where our survival brain, and when that's wired, we also, like you said, it draws blood and resources from the prefrontal cortex. So in a minute or in a moment when you're triggered with fear or something like that, extreme anxiety, um, you literally lose a lot of your access to your rational brain. Um, and I think we've all experienced that. If a moment of high emotion, you're not thinking you're clear. Um, the more hyperactive the amygdala is, the more signs of PTSD are present. So with PTSD, the prefrontal cortex is going to be underactive, the amygdala is going to be overactive. And then there's the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and differentiating between past and present. Works to remember and make sense of the trauma. With consistent exposure to trauma, it also shrinks, which you may have experienced with people with lots of trauma. Sometimes memory is a thing that's difficult for them. And, not just remembering uh, past events, but also just like mental organization, like being able to list of tasks in their head and things like that. All right, so next we're going to talk about crisis intervention. What can we do to help others when they're in crisis? Um, any intervention we do should be geared towards communicating these messages. First, you have the right to feel the way that you do. Second, I respect you as a person. I care about your point of view and how this has affected you. I'm not judging you, and I have faith that you're capable of making decisions about what is best for you in your circumstances. Anything we do has to start kind of from those principles. Um, if you're not feeling those and it's not being communicated to the person, they're going to question your authenticity about it. So crisis is individual in nature. What might be a crisis for one person may not be a crisis for another person. Um, something is a crisis when there's a significant and overwhelming emotional response. We're responding to their emotional response rather than the conditions of the crisis necessarily. At least initially, when we're de-escalating, we're mainly going off of the information we're getting from their emotional response. Later, we can get into what were the conditions that created this these circumstances. Crisis is short-term and intense typically. It's overwhelming and not sustainable over a long period of time. Um, if you've ever been sort of in a long-term stress, you have a family member who's passing away over a week or something. Um, exhausting, exhausting, takes everything out of you. If the circumstances that cause the crisis are unchanged or unresolved, the crisis state can continue or reemerge, which can lead to further trauma um, and some of the harmful effects of long-term trauma. So after de-escalating, we have to try and work on making plans about what is within our control. Right? I'm not going to fix that. Crisis is an opportunity for change and growth, like we talked about with your panic attack, right? If you have the right mindset, sometimes I'm like, I wish I didn't have some of the traumas I have, but then I'm like, but then I wouldn't be me, and I wouldn't have the wisdom I have, and so it's like, yeah, I guess I am thankful I had them and learned how to have a good life with them. Wasn't great before that. uh, depending on the client, depending where they are, the circumstances, they may or may not really be open to change or growth in that time. So, if they're not, you can't really force that, but you can still help at least de-escalate them. I hope if they're coming to us, they have a little bit of openness to change and growth. So there's four main states that people tend to go into during a crisis. They have weird names. I don't know where the names come from, but this is the name. So the first one is impact, and that's characterized by someone having an attitude of sort of denial. This isn't happening. There's usually few or no emotions that kind of dissociated, um, shock and numbness, almost kind of like a freeze response. That's one way that many people will experience crisis. Another way they might experience is called state of adjustment. And that's when they're beginning to problem solve. They're thinking maybe I could do this. They still have lots of emotions, but they have better decision making capacity. They're starting to access the prefrontal cortex, um, which means they might still have strong emotions, but they're not fully flooded and overwhelmed by them. Another thing is called emotive. That's when you're just totally overwhelmed. Oftentimes you have conflicting emotions and difficulty with decision making and rational thinking. These aren't in any order, by the way. I mean, ideally, you would move towards sort of the from emotive to what was the last one, adjustment, and then towards reconstruction, but not necessarily going to get to the full resolution, and you're not necessarily going to do it immediately. Final state people might be in is called reconstruction, and that's when they're actually problem solving and they're making commitments to themselves and to other people of I'm going to do this. I'm going to, you know, commit to exercising this amount of time every day, right? And there oftentimes people will do have accountability partners of some sort. Um, that's one of the biggest values of communicating a goal for ourselves to other people is they can help keep us motivated. Um, During this time, feelings are usually manageable and they can look into the future. Doesn't mean you're not still traumatized. Doesn't mean you forgot about what happened to you. It's just more manageable. People may loop or jump around from one of those states to another one depending on the time and circumstances. Someone might generally be handling a, a traumatic experience pretty well and they're pretty stabilized from it. And then they might get triggered and go into emotive for a period of time. It's very individual because it depends on what things overwhelm us, trigger us, stress us. Um, our goals aren't necessarily to move them through the stages. Sometimes it's just, or sometimes it's appropriate, but also oftentimes they simply just need to vent and feel heard and need help re-regulating, especially those ones where they're not, where they're still really overwhelmed. Um, so understanding these can help us identify kind of what state a person is in. It can help us understand what we can do to help get them a little bit better than they can. There's also tools you can use to kind of assess yourself too, right? If you see yourself struggling with things, you can kind of see where am I with these and use that to sort of think about what you can do because the solutions are going to be different if you're 100% emotionally overwhelmed and if you can actually start to plan and implement changes, you're going to have different solutions for both of those. All right, so effective listening in our job is very important. We want to practice active or empathetic listening when working with clients. In order to do that, there's a few things we need to look out for. We need to check our biases and judgments. Number one, we need to understand that no one is immune to biases and judgments. We all have them. So that takes a little bit of humility, I think, right? Because I think most people strive to not be biased, but nonetheless, we do have them. So um, be open to the idea that you might have biases and be open-minded that other people might bring those to your attention, right? And, I'm not saying they're 100% right every time they bring it up, but there might be something to it. So be willing to consider that. To be effective, empathetic listening, you need to be present and not distracted. So in this context, I don't care that you're knitting, but if I was like trauma dumping on you, that would probably bother me, right? Um, Listen for additional meaning communicated through body language. Um, that's a huge one. The majority of our communication is through our body language. If someone says something and their body language doesn't align, if they say, I feel happy, but their body language isn't feeling that, we're gonna go to the body language messaging more often than what they're saying, right? I think we're a lot better at kind of lying with our words about how we're doing than we are with our body. Use your intuition to identify underlying emotion and meanings. Um, a lot of times, people in crisis, they need help defining the words you're communicating with us so that they start client. Um, so when I was with the 14-year-old girl that I told you guys about, I picked up right away. It sounds like you're really worried about your mom and going back and talking about this with her. Um, want to verify your intuition though. I think intuition is a great thing. I think it's often very accurate. Sometimes it's not, but I think sometimes we're like, I would say we're kind of conditioned to have like a lot of self doubt about our intuition. But I actually think it's generally a pretty strong, reliable tool. Um, but just like feelings in general, they can be sort of unhelpful or inaccurate, right? Sometimes. So you want to verify with the person. It sounds like you're saying you're really worried about your mom, right? That gives them an opportunity to say, yes, that's what's going on, or no, it's not. And if you misinterpreted, most people are going to correct you and they're not going to be upset because you're attempting to understand them, right? And you might help them come to a realization they're not saying your thoughts. You might plant a seed, something that's helpful. Another way to verify is to repeat the words back to them in different language. Goes a long way in building validation and comfort. Having open body language is important. Like I said, most communication is body language. So if we're saying I'm here to help you, but I don't look like I'm here to help you, so you're going to feel uncomfortable, right? And you want to listen with a focus on trying to understand their perspective. We should be doing very little. I think you should do this, right? We can propose options, but we want to do it in a way that's like, here's the options. What do you think about this? Go with their lead, talk about the ones that they chose. I talked about this a little yesterday, but it's a good reminder. Eye contact, be mindful about being too intense with it. 50 to 70% rule, meaning you should have eye contact 50 to 70% of the time, typically 4 or 5 seconds at a time, so enough to like make a thought. A complete thought, and you move on. More than that can be very intimidating for people. And actually, some cultures not inappropriate. So it's something to consider as well. Especially if it's like an older person, something older than you. A lot of Asian cultures, it's considered respectful. Okay. Ask follow-up questions. So just to tell you more about that, how could you have responded differently? Um, Asking follow-up questions shows you're listening. It shows you're thinking about what they're saying, um, and you're trying to understand. It also can be a way for you to gather more information without really necessarily asking really directly, right? Um, a lot of times when we're at SARP calls, we're kind of trying to gather the story of what happened, but we're not really directly asking, did this happen? Did this happen? How did that happen? Right? So you're kind of using questions to help you um, gain little pieces of understanding as you go. Really important to just be patient. People in crisis are going to be struggling to communicate oftentimes. They might be looping through different states. They might be repetitive or they might be rambling. Um, expect that that's going to happen and try to be patient through it. Allow silence. I think that can go a long way when people are processing. I know times when I've been talking with someone about something kind of serious and then they just kind of go quiet for 30 seconds. Pretty clear to me they're processing something. And I think giving someone that space could be really helpful. You can recognize it. You can say it looks like you're thinking. You don't have to just sit there silent. But if you say, yeah, it looks like you're thinking through something, they'll say, yeah, give me a second. And, no, I'm not. Right? They'll respond to that, and if they need that space, then allow that space. I think oftentimes we have sort of an anxious urge to fill space, social space. Um, I think that can interfere with connection sometimes. When people are silent, they're typically processing. So, especially if they're looking away from you, right? Oftentimes people will look away or down or up, or when they're accessing different parts of their brain. So that's a clue that they're thinking. Okay. Uh, Active or empathetic listening is particularly important when when you're working with someone who's significantly different than you, not taking along any type of identity. Um, you will have to do more work for them to feel understood, right? If you're different demographics than them, oftentimes. And that's just the reality, right? You classify people as like, I assume this person has had similar experiences to me, or I assume this person has not, right? You may not have had similar experiences, but that doesn't mean you can't understand, right? It just means you have a little bit higher of a burden to communicate what you understand. Attempt to understand the experience from their perspective and worldview. Ask questions if you don't understand. So this is just trying to understand what are their motivations, what are their values, what are their religious beliefs, if that's relevant. You know, you don't need to endorse their religion, but you want to understand if religion is important to them, how does that shape their values? How does that shape the decisions they make? That's a tool you can use to help motivate them, right? Um, it sounds kind of like manipulation, but I don't really think it is exactly. It's just kind of recognizing the tools you have, right? And leveraging the tools that you have. Be open to accepting that you may be ignorant about certain identities. So this is going back to the bias conversation. Um, we all are ignorant about some group of people somewhere in the world, right? Many of us are ignorant about people around us, right? Just be open to that, and be open to sort of self-reflection. Um, Trauma and crisis can cause people to time travel to past experiences and narratives. If they're doing this, try to help draw them back to the present. I have some questions of what are you struggling with today? What they're struggling with today is probably linked to that traumatic experience, but in that moment, they're being triggered is not going to be resolved by talking about it. Right? We got to regulate first, then we can revisit sort of the deeper things in the past. Huge thing: illuminate or clarify conflict. These people, the clients, are going to have all kinds of conflicts in their life. They're going to have conflicts with themselves in their own mind of, I love this person, but I don't like this thing that they do. Um, or it sounds like you love your boyfriend, but you're also afraid of him, or you're worried for your children, or um, I think we all have kind of conflicting thoughts about a lot of people around us, right? Like relationships with our siblings and our parents and other family members. Um, most of mine are not 100% positive. So there's people have their strengths and their weaknesses, and so anyways, helping people to come to that understanding can help them realize, number one, they're conflicted, because sometimes they haven't really accepted that yet. And then from there, it could potentially be a way to start talking about, so what do you do, right? Is this a conflict you can live with? Is this a conflict you need to resolve? How do we do that? Use and rather than but, because it shows that both things are true. I think we tend to struggle with accepting things that seem to be a conflict with each other. But I think the reality is um, conflicting things are often true. And allowing silence is a sign of comfort. Great to always provide a summary of your current topic conversation before moving on to others. That can kind of help communicate that you're going to move on to something else, but also it's just sort of one final validation of I heard you through the summary of what you said. And it gives them one final opportunity to add anything else or correct you if you still have any misunderstandings of what they're saying. If any action planning is done, it should be restated in that summary too. Like, you're like, okay, we agreed when this happens, you're going to call this person, right? Let's do things like safety planning, right? Safety planning is like worst case scenarios. You have a plan and you're ready to execute it, make it happen. When you're in the middle of being assaulted is not the time to consider what's my plan for safety. You need to have that plan before that happens. All right, authenticity is huge. Traumatized people have really strong intuition about authenticity because they've been burned by a lot of people typically. Um, so don't make false promises and be willing to admit when you don't know things goes a long way. Um, for me, I respect people so much more if they just accept limitations. If I have a question and they don't know the answer, and they're just honest about that, I respect that so much more than them making something up. It also shows that it's okay to like have some flaws and not be perfect. Right? And I think that's an important thing to model for a lot of clients because they might have a lot of things going on in their life or aspects of themselves that they're not happy with, um, or they're not accepting fully. Also, yeah, like acknowledging your own ignorance can really help along with humility and comfortability with learning as you go. Growth is a process, and we're not going to go from flawed to perfect. There'll be many steps along the way, right? Right. Okay. Unconditional positive regard. That means essentially uh, you're assuming positive intent. You're assuming that they're capable, um, and that they're invested, right, in improving the circumstances that they're coming to us about. I would say this is also an important thing to do for yourself, it's like a self-compassion thing as well. Try to practice that with yourself as well, um, especially when you make mistakes, where you can like actually point to a thing you did wrong. Try to accept that, learn from it, of course, but also be like, that's part of the process, right? We all make mistakes. You know, if you keep making the same mistake over, that's something to think about. But yeah, we're all gonna make it. We kind of talked about that. Skip ahead. You don't need to share someone else's values to be an effective listener, as long as you can understand their perspective and what is important to them. And so we need to cultivate the ability to set our values aside, which means also we need to be open-minded and respectful of other people's values, um, some of which we may disagree with. But our job is to help them in the way that they feel is helpful to them. When we fail to set our values aside, judgment creeps in, and we may stop listening and fall short in empowering this person. They might sense that it could definitely damage the quality of that relationship, which may cause them to withdraw or not engage as much. All right, safety planning is personalized practical plan that includes ways to remain safe while staying within a relationship, if planning to leave or after leaving. It's very specific to the circumstances. Um, some of the things you might consider for safety planning. I'll send out. I don't have it printed, but we have a document that has considerations like someone who has children but is still with their abuser, someone who has children but is leaving their abuser, someone who is pregnant but leaving. And it's all these recommendations of things you might discuss with that person if they're relevant to that, right? I'll send that out to you. We can note that. I don't remember. Um, so some of the things that are common are if they haven't left yet, uh, having like a go bag, a bag with clothes and basic needs ready to go, so that if something goes down, you can get out of it and you have what you need, and you don't have to come back and potentially be confronted by that person again. So oftentimes we advise, have a bag with some cash in it, with some basic needs and clothes and food, medications, those things for the kids if you're going to take the kids with you. Um, have a plan of where you're going to go if you do that. Much better to have a plan than just believe. I mean, you have to do that. You have to do that, but um, it's not a great time to be making a lot of decisions. Right? Uh, we often advise money because depending on the situation, partner might have total control of the money or have access to joint accounts. They can cancel your cards, things like that. So it's best to have some cash. We often advise, if possible, to get a second phone, backup phone, independent of that person, because if they're the primary on the account, they can deactivate, they can access the records, things like that, access to the location. And we actually give out phones here, so we can. We don't provide the service, but we get phones. So um, it's just like old like people's iPhones and Android phones. Yeah, um, you can call 911 on them. Yeah, so yeah, but it could be activated, but they would have to do that. Yeah, and they can be used like with Wi-Fi and stuff. So it gives them something. Um, what else is there? If there's kids involved, we usually want to talk about what's their action plan if an incident starts happening. Oftentimes, kids feel they need to intervene or protect the parent, things like that. Um, so you want to have a plan and rehearse with them. If you know you're going to be potentially exposed to harm in the near future because you're going to be there for a little while for whatever reason, um, you know, have a have a place where the kids go and lock the door. Have a neighbor that you trust that they can go to and ask, for help. If you're going to involve other people, you want to communicate with them though, right? You don't want your kids to just randomly show up at your neighbors and be like, "Oh, wait," you know. Ideally, you would have alerted them. This might happen if it does. You're going to do that. Oftentimes we say, uh, to the best of your ability, restrict access to weapons. Um, if there's a protection order in place, most of the time the person will be required to surrender their weapon. Um, but also be aware of things that could be, tons of things around the house could be used as an weapon too. So, I mean, you could change your name and go through that process. Uh, it's possible. I don't know much about that process, but things we can help with. Um, for example, we have Agis confidentiality program that people can use. So as it is, your voter registration is public. The only one who can request it can have your home address on there. It could be a problem if we don't want people to know who they are. So the state has a address confidentiality program, basically where it's like a PO box where all your mail goes to, and then you get collected there. There was someone here yesterday that was helping with that. Um, and that's a situation where probably relocation would be helpful. Yeah, and we'll talk on Thursday a little bit more about protection orders because Kayla going to come and talk about legal stuff. You know a lot more about that than me. But I will say, in general, protection orders can get put in place really fast. I did one with uh, the woman I talked about who's prosecuting this guy, um, and she filled out paperwork, and it was like 9 a.m. the next morning. We had a, we had a hearing, um, and the burden of proof is pretty low. So for the most part, I suppose this could be abused, but for the most part, if you're claiming fear for your safety, if you have any documentation of that, most of the time they'll approve what's called the temporary order, like immediately, like next day, and then there'll typically be a follow-up hearing, like 14 days later or so, where if that person feels wants to dispute it, right, that's the opportunity to say, well, being falsely accused or that kind of stuff. At that point, it could then be taken away. But the initial protection order, in my experience, is almost always granted. And typically that means weapons will be confiscated, which is something to think about, because that might be serving for an abuser, right? All right. Depending on the circumstances, they might need to plan on how they will avoid the abuser, how they will communicate their decisions with loved ones, if they will, or who they will. Some family members might not be safe to communicate that, right? They might still have ties to the abuser, and so one of the things that you want to talk to people about is really have them think carefully and really assess the people in their lives. Who are the ones that they can really count on to help them in these circumstances? A lot of us have people in our lives that generally want us to do well, but um, may not always have our best interests. So let's do a realistic assessment of who can I count on, who do I trust is going to protect me, because the truth is you need other people to help protect you. I don't just mean physically, I just mean you need to protect where you are, what you're doing, that sort of stuff. Talk about how to keep the children safe. So oftentimes there is no custody arrangement in place, or it's in process. A lot of times people start that process as they're leaving. There may have been tons of abuse happening, but they haven't really documented that it's happened yet. Um, so it could be possible that someone might leave their abuser, but they can't keep their kids from them. The kids still have limitations. So then you might want to talk about what happens when the kids are alone with this person. Where do they go? You know, we'll talk about where do we do exchanges. We'll talk about do we have a third party like aunt comes and exchanges them so you don't have to contact that person. It can be really obvious in that sometimes it's very simple. Um, but remember, like these are people who are in crisis and they're probably struggling to communicate how they feel right now, let alone think about what they're going to do in the future. Um, so they have limited access to their logical planning brain. So think of ourselves as kind of lending those to them in that moment. Um, and yeah, it's so sometimes it's very, very basic. Do you have your food? Do you have your food? Do you have food for your cat? Things like that. You want to have a safety plan written well in advance. It can help you execute and move through potential safety hazards without being overwhelmed by making those decisions in the moment. It's kind of like, uh, I think about like police or military who do like like combat rehearsal scenarios, right? So they know how they'll respond in certain situations before that situation is hit, right? They practice drawing their gun, they practice, fighting skills, things like that, so that they've actually played the scenario out before it happens, right? Right. And if you hear stories of like experienced police and military people, they almost all of them are like, it's just automatic. You're trained so much that you know exactly what to do and you don't have to think about it. Decision fatigue is real, and deciding to leave an abuser often comes with months or even years of ambivalence. Uh, they, they might have been thinking about it, but then doubting themselves, deciding against it, losing their mind. So if someone is kind of really taking solid steps towards that, they might be prone to doubting themselves almost immediately, right? So it's not a great time to be making new decisions for that reason. Um, yeah, that ambivalence and I don't know. Self doubt can be dangerous in this, right? You want to have trust in yourself. Okay, getting to a safer, more stable situation can allow the space to begin to plan for the future. So, like we're talking about, that might be relocation, um, getting them just to a safe enough place that you can start to talk about the future. Sometimes safety planning is where are we going to relocate you right now? That's how urgent it is. Oftentimes, this is the purpose that our shelter serves as a place to get to a safer, more stable situation while they make decisions about what to do next. Um, we need time, space, and safety to allow our brains to make good decisions. Oftentimes, 100% safety cannot be reasonably achieved against people. So, if nothing else, we want to reduce the exposure to risk. You're not always going to be able to protect them 100%, and they're not always going to protect themselves 100% too. Um, let's see about this video. This is a short video. I think it's about 15 minutes. Um, it's just about a woman who works at some sort of crisis hotline, and a man calls, and it isn't related to domestic violence or sexual assault, but I think it's just a really good example of like the type of presence we want to have. Try and notice like what she's doing to create space for him to feel welcome.
Well, no, see, because you wouldn't need to do anything. We could do that for you here. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Yeah, but just give me 2 seconds. Oops. Sorry. 2 seconds. I'll get this number for you. Yep.
Hello, Crisis Centre. How can I help you? Hello there, my name's Heather. Can I help at all? You know, it can be very hard to speak when we're feeling stressed or when we're unhappy. Sounds to me as if you're feeling very unhappy.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be able to share anything about yourself with me?
I'll try.
Good. I'm Heather. Is it okay to ask what your name is?
Stanley.
Hello there, Stan. It's all right if I call you Stan.
Yeah, of course.
Good. That's nice. We know each other's names now.
Yeah.
There's no hurry, Stan. I'll be here all evening. You just take your time, okay? What is it that's making it so difficult at the moment, Stan?
Scared.
What's making you scared, Stan?
I can't tell you.
Okay. You know, sometimes when we're scared about something and we can share it with someone else, it helps us feel a little bit less scared.
Yes, I
you know?
know that. I just can't tell you.
That's all right. You just take your time, all right?
Anyway, it's too late now. It's already done.
What's already done, Stan? Has life been a bit difficult lately for you?
Difficult, yes.
Yeah?
Yes, it has, yes.
Sorry to hear
It'll be
that.
difficult for a long time, for 2 years.
Yeah?
2 years ago today.
What happened 2 years ago, Stan? Have you called us before, Stan?
No.
You sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay. Stanley, just going back, you said it's already done. What did you mean by it's already done?
I can't tell you. You'll trace the call, and I don't want you to.
Oh, we won't
just
trace
hang
it.
up.
No, don't hang up, Stanley. Don't hang up. We don't trace calls ever.
You sure?
Yeah, I promise you.
Just,
We don't do that here. We just offer support during difficult times, okay?
all right.
I won't do anything you don't want me to.
Okay.
I swear.
I'm sorry. What's your name? Heather?
That's right.
Heather.
Good
I'm
memory.
I'm sorry, Heather.
No need to apologise. It sounds to me like it was very painful for you.
Oh, yes.
Whatever happened 2 years ago.
Yes. Oh, yes. It was very painful, too.
It's all right.
I lost Joan.
And who was Joan exactly?
and my wife. God.
Sounds like you're feeling a lot of pain. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, Stan. Now, Stan, you said before that you were scared. What exactly are you scared about, Stan?
Oh, I felt so desperate.
You say you felt desperate, Stan?
Yeah, I did. I felt so, but I'm much calmer now.
What's made you feel calmer, Stan? Stan?
I can't say.
You know, sometimes when life gets bad, we feel really desperate, and sometimes we do stupid things we wouldn't normally do.
I know, but I can't go on. I couldn't go on, not without Joan.
Have you taken some pills, Stan?
Huh? Yes, I have.
Okay. And what exactly did you take, Stan?
Not, what do you,
Stan?
antidepressants.
Yeah?
I got them from the doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many you took?
Oh, lots. More than enough.
Okay. And do you remember when you took them exactly? Try to think.
I had something half an hour ago, something like that.
Yeah? And how do you feel about that now?
Calm,
Yeah.
quite calm. I think.
Okay.
I think they've started working now. I'm quite frightened.
Frightened you might have made a mistake?
No, frightened of being on my own at the end. Can you just stay there and
Yeah,
talk
of course, I am here. So Stan, if you tell me your address, I can get an ambulance straight over to you, yeah?
to me? No,
And then you can receive treatment,
no,
and then we can have a little chat again.
no,
Yeah?
no.
And we can really help you to improve these horrible feelings you're having.
No.
We can do that.
No, it's not possible. Not without Joan, I told you. You sound very nice, and thank you for caring, but I know this is right for me. I've been thinking about it for 2 years now, and I've weighed it all up. I've thought about it, and it's the only way. It's the only way.
Stan, do you have any family at all? Any children?
Yes.
Yeah.
A daughter,
What's her name?
Molly.
Molly?
This was 25 years ago. She was stillborn. Joan's buried with her.
Oh, that must be very hard for you.
I visit them and take them flowers every week. We were unable to have any more pregnancies after that.
Must have been very hard.
Yes,
Yeah.
It was much harder for Joan.
Of course.
Much harder for her.
Can you tell me about Joan? What would you like doing together?
Well, we were married for 31 years. We were devoted to each other. We just looked after each other. I did jobs around the house and did the roses, and She worked part-time. She was a volunteer around the corner at the Marston.
She sounds like a very lovely lady. Yeah.
Oh, she was. She was a very lovely lady. She was wonderful. She really cared about people. It was particularly difficult when we lost little Molly, but we managed to get through that. And she got breast cancer. She had all the treatment, and chemo, horrible chemo, but she suffered for 3 years. I keep thinking she's going to come home. Of course, she never does. She never does.
Stan, I feel I know so much about you. I feel like you're my friend. But I'm a bit distressed about all those pills you've taken. Can I call you an ambulance, please?
Now, please
Stan.
don't ask me that again. I will hang up.
No, don't hang up, Stanley. Don't hang up. Don't do that.
Can't you just stay and talk to me? Like, are you allowed to do that? Can you just stay there and talk and hold my hand? And is that all right?
Yeah. Of course I can, Stanley. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm scared.
I know you are, sweetheart. You tell me about Joan.
What?
What did you like doing together?
Oh, we liked lots of things. We liked walks, walking in the country. Even in the winter, we'd wrap up and go. She loved music. I played in a band, you see.
Did you? What sort of music did you play?
Jazz. I
Oh,
played tenor sax.
really?
Yeah.
I used to play a little bit of jazz on the piano.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. What sort of stuff did you do?
Glenn Miller. The whole performance. Standing up to play solos and that, string of moves, a string of Glenn Miller, the whole performance. Standing up to play solos and that, a string of pearls in the mood.
Yeah, I love Glenn Miller. It's a different world, isn't it? I once tried to play tenor sax. I could only make it squeak.
Yeah, you can have it. It's all about lip control, or embouchure, they call it. It's easy to learn. I could teach you.
Yeah, could you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like that. You sound very talented. I'd love to have been a performer.
Why didn't you?
Too much of a scaredy cat. You know. I always wanted to play, Ronnie Scott's or something.
Well, we played Ronnie Scott's.
Really?
Yeah, quite a few times.
That's amazing, isn't it? You do that. Well, I still love it there. I used to go all the time. Been there in ages.
Why not?
I don't know. I don't really go out anymore. I'm too old.
Too old. I'll tell you about old. Young girl like you. Go again.
Stan, I'm sorry, but I have to ask, Are you sure it's not too late?
I'm afraid it is too late. But you've been wonderful. You've been a wonderful friend to me. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. My name, my real name, is John. I did call you once.
Did you?
So sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right, John. You just stay on the line. You just stay with me, John. John, you keep talking to me, John. You please stay on the line. John, you keep speaking to me. Don't hang up. John, you still there?
Hello? Hello, my love. I'm home.
I'm through here, my love. I'm just having a little sleep. Where have you been?
I've been looking for you.
Well, you found me now. Come on then, let's have a look at you. I missed you.
I've missed you too.
Take this dance with me, 'cause you're still the one, 'cause you're still the one. When the evening's done, it's the same old one that we've always done. When the last bells rung, take this dance with me. Doesn't matter where we've been. Doesn't matter where you're going to. Come here to me, let me show you how to count on the right ones and let the rest go. Take this chance on me if I'm still the one. When the last bell's rung, take this dance with me. Doesn't matter where you've been. Doesn't matter where you're going to. Take this time.